Hey there, art geeks! My name is Sophia and I'm an art curator. I usually make videos about exhibitions, but I decided to add a new feature to my channel talking about books. Every 2 weeks I will talk about a book that I think will be interesting for those who like art. You may be thinking, hey, what kind of books do art curators read? I bet they're really boring. Well, sometimes that's true, but I will try to keep things interesting by not focusing too much on art books or history books. Because if you're a curator, well, first you should love reading because reading is awesome. And second, you should be reading a bit of everything because books are a form of art, so it's kind of part of your job. Also, the ideas and stories that you discover might inspire you to create something of your own. So, without further ado, let me present to you the book that I'm going to be talking about today. It's called The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley. You might know Aldous Huxley from his novel Brave New World, which I recommend as well. This book can be considered a classic. It was published in 1954 and, in a nutshell, it's about the author's experience with a mind-altering drug, mescaline. And I read this because a friend of mine who works with drugs recommended it to me. This book is important for many reasons. First of all, it changes your perception of drugs and drug users. Drugs and recreational drugs in specific can be, but are not always used as an escape. For millennia, they have been used as a gateway for a higher state of consciousness, much like meditation, for example. Huxley talks a lot about how our brains work and how they filter most of what we experience in order to allow us to survive as effectively as possible. And then he talks about how drugs like mescaline can alter that. Now, I chose this book for one reason in particular. Aldous Huxley says that he wants to see the world the way that artists do, which means that he wanted to see the world in a way that was not limited to what could be considered useful. And while he is on his trip, one of the things that he does is look at art, specifically draperies, and his description of what he sees is truly amazing. Draperies, as I have now discovered, are much more than devices for the introduction of non-representational forms into naturalistic paintings and sculptures. What the rest of us see only under the influence of mescaline, the artist is congenitally equipped to see all the time. His perception is not limited to what is biologically or socially useful. A little of the knowledge belonging to mind at large oozes past the reducing valve of brain and ego into his consciousness. It is a knowledge of the intrinsic significance of every existence. For the artist, as for the mescaline taker, draperies are living hieroglyphs that stand in some peculiarly expressive way for the unfathomable mystery of pure being. He also looks at a painting by Cézanne, and I should mention that Huxley seems to have a grudge for non-representational artists, but he does like Cézanne. At this stage of the proceedings, I was handed a large colored reproduction of the well-known self-portrait by Cézanne. The head and shoulders of a man in a large straw hat, red-cheeked, red-lipped, with rich black whiskers and a dark, unfriendly eye. It is a magnificent painting, but it was not as a painting that I now saw it. For the head promptly took on a third dimension and came to life as a small goblin-like man looking out through a window in the page before me. I started to laugh. And when they asked me why, what pretensions, I kept repeating. Who on earth does he think he is? The question was not addressed to Cézanne in particular, but to the human species at large. Who did they all think they were? He also makes a comparison between drugs, art, and religion. He says that all of these are instruments of escape and that people need them in order to cope with the human existence. Most men and women lead lives at the worst so painful, at the best so monotonous, poor and limited, that the urge to escape, the longing to transcend themselves, if only for a few moments, is and has always been one of the principal appetites of the soul. Art and religion, carnivals and saturnalia, dancing and listening to oratory, all these have served, in H.G. Wells' phrase, as doors in the wall. And for private, for everyday use, there have always been chemical intoxicants. This is a thought-provoking book, and from an artistic perspective, it's interesting to consider what exactly perception is in regards to the experience of art. Is it a purely aesthetic experience? Or is it intellectual or emotional and therefore ultimately chemical? Tell me your opinion of this book if you have read it, and if you haven't, I hope this video has made you curious enough to give it a try. And if you do, let me know what you thought in the comments. That's it from me this week, and I will see you in 2 weeks for more book recommendations.